When Oliver's feet suddenly began to hurt, he glanced down and saw that he had trodden on a suspicious-looking stone. But upon closer inspection, he realized that this was no ordinary rock. He thought he'd stumbled across something fantastic. With the hope of exchanging the stone for a large sum of money, Oliver decided to take it to a jeweler. He will never be the same after this. However, not how he anticipated. There was so much discomfort in Oliver's foot that he could only walk with a limp. One of the lifeguards came over to him and asked how he was doing. Intuitively, Oliver wanted to hide the stone. However, he felt compelled to show the lifeguard what he had accidentally trodden on. Oliver eventually revealed his discovery to the lifeguard. As soon as he opened his hand, the stone started to shine. The lifeguard politely asked if he may examine the rock. After some thought, Oliver handed it over to the lifeguard. As soon as he handed it over, the stone's light went out. The lifeguard was a little bit shocked. When Oliver asked whether he could have the stone back, the lifeguard said it was his to keep. Oliver felt a sense of relief, but he would come to deeply regret his decision. After some thought, Oliver chose to see a jeweler he was familiar with. Right now, this is the only person he can put his faith in. Within a short amount of time, Oliver arrived at Mark's jewelry shop. The store's complete lack of customers was a blessing, he thought. Mark had not expected to run into Oliver. After a brief introduction, Oliver launched into a lengthy explanation about the extraordinary gem he was trying to sell. Mark first didn't believe Oliver, but eventually came around to accepting it. Even though Mark saw the shiny stone in Oliver's palm, he assumed it was only a souvenir. Once Oliver gave Mark the stone, however, its radiance faded. Mark was at first completely befuddled, but then he had a realization. However, he needed a bit of time. Once Mark laid his eyes on the stone, he couldn't believe it. Mark seemed to have made some kind of realization. Mark informed Oliver that he needed a whole day to research and verify the stone's legitimacy. Once he had that information, he could make a fair offer. After some thought, Oliver decided to accept these conditions. The stone occupied Oliver's mind continuously, so he couldn't sleep. Is there a chance that it's worth a fortune? At long last, he was able to drift off to sleep. But an hour later, he awoke to find himself soaked in perspiration. His intuition told him that something terrible was going to occur. Later that day, Oliver made his way back to the Mark. Everything seemed completely different from yesterday and less welcoming, but Oliver just stopped caring. He needed to know the stone's value. Mark, however, displayed very suspicious behavior. Mark started to seem weird and quite suspicious. He assured Oliver that he had never seen this stone in his life. Things didn't make sense to Oliver. Mark had a lot more to say as well. He launched into a lengthy rant. Oliver and Mark got into a very heated disagreement. Mark refused to even present the stone to Oliver, even though Oliver intended to get the artifact from him. He said he was stripped of such authority. The presence of other customers made Oliver reconsider his desire to initiate a fight. With a sigh, Mark gives Oliver back the stone. As Oliver was beginning to regain his composure, Mark informed him that he had made a serious error. He made a mistake by asking for the stone back. Mark was certain Oliver would come to deeply regret his actions. Oliver takes the stone and runs away. What Mark had just said remained on his mind. This can't be good. Just when did he uncover anyway? After getting inside his vehicle, Oliver had the unsettling feeling that he was being watched. At all costs, he had to keep the stone safe. Oliver had no idea what would happen next, and with that, everything was okay, and Oliver could finally rest easy with the stone in his possession. Oliver is eager to eliminate the stone once and for all. He plans to visit a jewelry shop first thing in the morning. There's no use in trying to dispose of it now. Those seeking it will surely come again. The night was another sleepless one for Oliver. He timed how long it would take him to leave for the jewelry store and get rid of the stone. Oliver was waiting for the jeweler as he opened the doors of the shop. As he enters the jeweler, he has the distinct impression that he is being welcomed. Very quickly, he felt at home and accepted. Perhaps Mark had mentioned the stone to the jeweler, or perhaps there was information Oliver was missing. Oliver was called in by the jeweler to look at the stone. He gasped at the sight of the stone, letting Oliver know that he was aware of something more. In fact, The stone was completely dull. The jeweler then had Oliver feel it for himself. The moment Oliver put his hand on the stone, it started to radiate light. The jeweler then made a very generous proposal. Oliver thought he had died and gone to paradise. The stone would be gone for good, and he'd be rich in the process. But the situation would turn ugly rapidly. Since Oliver was so content, he relaxed his guard. The jeweler was informed that he accepted his offer without giving it any thought. The jeweler then offered to withdraw the funds himself. It was a lengthy process, however. It seemed like the jeweler was taking his time. To check anything was going on, Oliver knocked on his office door. There was, however, no reaction from the jeweler. Confused, Oliver couldn't figure out what was going on. He was solely interested in getting his hands on the money. A guy who had been shopping there before Oliver arrived was gazing directly at him. Even though Oliver didn't know it, he was being observed. Oliver was quite worried. There was not the slightest sign of movement from the guy, until Oliver had an agonizing sensation. Oliver had fallen on the floor without even realizing it. From behind, someone had ambushed him. Once the jeweler returned, he assured the guy that Oliver was really their man. After a while, Oliver began to weep. The jewelry shop was suddenly swarmed by extra people. Several minutes had passed before Oliver noticed the FBI had arrived. Even though Oliver didn't know for sure, he sensed that the stone was involved in their pursuit of him. After Oliver's arrest, he was informed of his right to stay quiet. The events around him left Oliver bewildered. Has he really been taken into custody? They forced him into the back of an FBI vehicle. Once Oliver realized what had happened, he was stunned. The shock was so great that he passed out briefly. Everything just became too much. The agents made attempts to revive him, but he remained unconscious. Oliver started pleading with the police to let him go free. They had no intention of releasing him. As soon as they could, they transported him to the local FBI headquarters. When he walked into the workplace, everyone stared at him like he was a dangerous criminal. If Oliver didn't straighten up his story, he would spend the rest of his life locked up. He faced the stone, and they pressed him for details on where he had obtained it and who had helped him. As a result of his ongoing astonishment, Oliver froze and couldn't respond to any of the questions that were posed to him. Following that, he was placed in a lineup. He was pressed for information about his cohorts. Not a single person in line seemed to know who Oliver was. The police officers appeared serious when Oliver inquired whether this was all a joke. He explains that he isn't familiar with anybody on the lineup. He is now prepared to give the whole narrative of how he obtained the stone. The cops were intrigued, and they agreed to take him away for questioning. Oliver starts to explain his perspective. While he was out surfing, he came upon the stone. It wounded his feet badly by accidentally stepping on it. He revealed the scar on his foot. The cops decided to trust him and check out the beach as a possible investigation location. Police officials accompanied Oliver to the shore so that he could point them the exact spot where he had discovered the stone. Oliver jabbed his finger directly at the ground near where he discovered the stone. Oliver jabbed his finger directly at the ground near where he discovered the stone. A big number of police officers promptly began looking into the situation. Thankfully, Oliver ran into the lifeguard he had already talked to. The lifeguard who was approached by the police consented to talk to them. He provided Oliver with a plausible alibi. When Oliver regained the cops' confidence, they started filling him in on the latest developments about the stone. The gem was taken last week during a major diamond theft. It was possible that Oliver might be exonerated. The true robbers were eventually caught because of the footsteps on the beach and the increased number of people who discovered stones. By abandoning their hijacked jet in the ocean, the thieves lost some of the precious jewels they had stolen. All of Oliver's losses were covered by the insurance company.